Welcome to The Authentic Path, where we explore the intersection of leadership, performance science, and ancient wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Vanessa Calderon. I'm a Harvard-trained physician and healer with over 20 years of leadership and business development experience. I blend science and ancestral wisdom with proven strategies to help you get the results you desire in work and in life without losing yourself along the way. Let's get started. Hello, friends. Welcome back to The Authentic Path. This is the third episode in a series that I've been doing on supporting us in really working through money and healing and increasing our capacity to receive more, our capacity to have more, and our capacity to make a bigger impact. I created the series especially for mission-driven leaders, for mission-driven coaches, entrepreneurs, for healers who want to have a big impact in this world without really betraying their values. They want to create and generate wealth, but really with integrity and really for the highest and greatest good of all. They want to be in right relationship with money. And the first two episodes, we talked about money and the deeper root causes of why so many smart and capable service-oriented women still struggle with money. We talked about legacy wounding, ancestral and collective trauma, the relationship between money and power, and how history and nervous systems have shaped our sense of safety with expansion. And today we're going to talk about something that is just as important, but it's sort of the other side of the equation. Because let's say that you've done a lot of work on healing around money. You've done a lot of work on releasing anything that you were holding that was making it hard for you to even talk about money or be with money, the concept of money, without being dysregulated. Let's say you no longer consciously think that money is a bad thing. Maybe you work through a lot of your scarcity mentality or your mindset. And let's say that you want more, that you desire more. And yet, for some reason, you still can't seem to make more, or you still keep hitting the same income ceiling. No matter what you do, no matter what strategies you implement, no matter that, you're continuing to make the same amount of money. You keep overworking, or you think, I feel like I'm just working so hard, but I am not increasing my capacity to make more money. I'm under earning. I keep hitting the same income ceiling. Very often when that's the case, the real issue is no longer earning. Because let's be honest, if you're listening to this podcast, you likely do not have a problem with earning or with working hard. You don't have a problem with working hard. The problem isn't with earning. The problem is now with receiving. Because in my experience, working with so many leaders and entrepreneurs, we're good at working hard. We're good at earning. We're not so good at receiving, and we are not so good at having. Having does not feel comfortable to us. So again, the relationship here is our relationship with receiving. So maybe you've noticed this pattern. You're likely incredibly generous. You love to help and you love to give your time, your energy, your care, your wisdom, your thoughts. But when someone wants to celebrate you, when someone wants to nurture you, take care of you, maybe they even just want to offer you a compliment, that can feel really uncomfortable. They want to give you a testimonial back, or they just want to pay you well. That feels uncomfortable. Something inside of you starts to feel restrictive, like it tightens. You start to deflect away the compliment. You start to minimize yourself. You feel really awkward. Maybe you just change the subject or you make a joke because it feels so uncomfortable. So there's this strange feeling of guilt, of discomfort, of pressure, of vigilance, of like this anxiety feeling when that starts to happen. So today we're unpacking this question, which is, why is it so easy for conscious service-driven women to give and so hard for us to receive? So first, I want to name something that's really important here. This concept of difficulty receiving, it's not evenly distributed. It's not evenly distributed across populations. We do see this primarily in women, and this is what's considered a collective trauma around receiving that we have seen around with women, especially if you're a woman who is a caregiver, a healer. Maybe you're first generation in this country. Maybe you come from an immigrant community. Maybe you're a woman of color. Maybe you were raised in a setting where there was real life experience scarcity or instability. Maybe you were the oldest in a family, the one that had to raise their siblings. Maybe you had to become an adult at a very early age. Maybe you were raised in a religious or service-oriented culture. In many of these contexts, what ends up happening is we inherit beliefs. Either they were taught to us explicitly or implicitly, where we need to be present for others. We need to help others. We can't be a burden. We should be grateful for what we have, that other people have it worse than we do, that we should be helping instead of needing, and that wanting more is selfish. Why would you want more? You already have so much. Look at all those people that don't have enough yet. So I just want to pause there and I want to just let that settle in your body, because when as a society we learn this and we sort of bring this into our bodies as our lived experience, that's how collective traumas are created. And there is a very real collective trauma around receiving with women. So I'm going to just zoom way back and talk about the historical context, because I think it's always really important for us to understand that it's not just our own personal lived experience. This probably comes from way before us. It outdated us. We probably inherited it from our family of origin, or maybe even ancestrally or generationally. So I think it's important to name that. For most of human history, survival was the main goal. You had to make sure you had food, shelter, safety. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me say that our brain is hardwired to do two things. It's hardwired to keep us alive and to do that as efficiently as possible. So even before we had, the European colonization, communities faced famine and war and disease. Receiving abundance or gifts or even like downtime could be dangerous. It was often impossible or could be dangerous. And you never wanted to be too visible, too wealthy, or indulgent, because it could make you a target of persecution or violence. During colonization, many indigenous communities across the world, including many tribes through Latin America and parts of Africa and Iran and many other parts of the world, had these economies that were based on community reciprocity, where what would happen inherently was it was sort of this like inherent gift-based economy. And all of that was forcibly shifted into an extraction-based, production-driven economy after colonization. So it shifted so much of receiving without earning, and that was really demonized as lazy. The concept of you being able to just receive without having to do the work or earn, it was considered laziness or uncivilized. Of course, we all know with the Industrial Revolution, productivity became tied to our own self-worth, which planted a subconscious belief that you have to constantly be producing, giving to prove your value. Otherwise, you're undeserving. And of course, that made it hard for us to receive. And instead, it pushed us to start consistently thinking we had to be earning. And the guilt you may feel around receiving, it doesn't just affect, people of color. In fact, especially actually in the US and Europe, this Puritan and Protestant work ethic, the cultural mindset emphasized self-denial and moral superiority of earning over simply receiving. And the concept of grace was framed religiously as something that's only given by God alone, that humans should not expect ease or luxury without having to work really hard and constantly be working. So receiving without extreme effort was seen as sinful, as immoral. So a lot of people that I work with experience so much guilt when it comes to things being easy. If things are easy, it wasn't worth it. I feel guilty. It should have been harder for me. It's really, really fascinating because whatever it is that you believe in, my experience of a higher power is one of love, of deep compassion, of kindness, not shaming us for receiving, especially when we're receiving with a deep amount of gratitude. I think that that's beautiful. And I actually think that's being in right relationship with the gifts that we get from higher power. When we are given gifts, we receive that with deep gratitude. We don't push it away. We don't say that was too easy. We say, thank you. Thank you. What a gift. Thank you. Our nervous system, our brain, our body, what did it learn based on everything, based on all of that historical context, but also our own lived experience and also the collective trauma of being a woman? That needing is dangerous, that wanting, we shouldn't need, that receiving makes us too much of a burden, that being needy is going to make you a burden, and that it's much better to give. It's better not to take up any space. Those types of things that some of us say, like, oh, you got to just think differently about. And yes, some of it is mindset work. It's actually, if you think about it, was a very intelligent survival adaptation. Okay, so based on all of this historical context, the collective trauma, I want to talk about what happened from a neuroscientific perspective. So in order for us to be in a space of receptivity to actually receive, it requires us to be in what's known as a ventral vagal state. That means a state where parasympathetic nervous system is turned on. That's our relaxation response. It requires us to be relaxed and safe so that we can be trusting, which is a very regulated nervous system. It can be calm. It can be open. It can trust. Because if you imagine, the opposite of that is you're closed off. You're afraid to receive. And so you push it away because you're not sure what's coming your way. It may not be safe. Opposite is you're calm, you're open. And if you're watching this on video, this is on YouTube, by the way, and I'm just opening my body and restricting, which is why I named that. But point is that you can be in a very relaxed state, and that is what allows you to receive. But if you're a descendant of collective trauma, and we know, because we talked about this in episode number 1, that if you are a descendant of someone that's experienced ancestral trauma, generational trauma, genocide, systemic oppression, or if you hold any of the toxic puritanical beliefs that were passed down to you, this affects the way your genes are expressed. And we know this through the science of epigenetics, which means we were actually born at baseline with a more dysregulated nervous system, sort of like constantly having our fight or flight response on all the time. So if you've ever wondered why you might run a little bit more anxious than others, this might be one of the reasons. And I named that because for 2 reasons. Number 1, I think it's important to just name so that you have an understanding. And once you have an understanding and you can accept the fact that this might be why I'm always so anxious, this might be why it makes it so hard for me to receive. From there, we can start doing the work to shift that. Because this is the beauty, our brain experiences something called neuroplasticity. Fancy word to mean that our brain, neuro, is plasticity, which means our brains will shift, they'll shape, they'll mold based on whatever it is that we want to experience, what we feed it, what we practice. That's really powerful. So if you come from a familial line that experienced, or even just a society where you experience collective trauma, generational trauma, ancestral trauma, and you were born with the baseline dysregulated nervous system, you have the power to change that. And the way you change that is in community, by surrounding yourself with people that are going to hold you with compassion, are not going to shame you for what you experience. They're going to support you in your healing and working with professionals to help you in your healing work. It's changeable. And the beauty of it being changeable is that you get to change that not just for yourself, you get to change that for the generations that come after you. I want to pause here for just a moment. If these episodes are resonating with you, and you're a female leader or entrepreneur who's mission-driven and here to make a real difference in the world, I want to share something that I created just for you. It's called Resourced Wealth. It's a healing approach to money, power, and capacity for mission-driven female leaders and entrepreneurs. Now, this is not a traditional business or money program. Instead, it's an in-depth, trauma-informed journey into all of the historical and systemic barriers that have shaped our complicated relationship with money and power, and all of the active healing work that's required to expand our capacity to receive and sustain real wealth without burning out or self-abandoning. Because here's what I know to be true. We need your work in this world, and we need you to stay whole while you're doing it. You were never meant to sacrifice your body, your health, or your spirit for your impact. And inside this program, we're not just building businesses or careers. We're building capacity, and we're reclaiming clean embodied power. And we're creating sustainable wealth that supports your life, wealth that supports your ancestral lineage and your mission. So if this series has been speaking to something inside of you, I invite you to learn more and join our waitlist. at vanessacalderonmd.com/resourcedwell. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the work you're here to do. The world needs you now more than ever. There's a link in the show notes where you can find more about the program. The first cohort starts on February 26th and is specifically for women of color, and our fall cohort is open to all women. All right, let's come back to our conversation. Maybe your epigenetics were affected by the generations that came before you, but when you do the work to change that, your genes are changed and the way you express your genes are exchanged, and you don't have to pass down that trauma to the next generation. It's incredibly beautiful, powerful stuff. And in many indigenous communities, we believe that time is not linear. Time is circular. So when you do the work to heal that for your line, you're healing it for the generations after you, but also the generations that come before you. That's really, really beautiful. So all of this to say that if receiving feels unsafe, now you understand why. The body perceives relaxing, pleasure, even abundance as unsustainable, or that's not always going to be there, or dangerous. And there's even data to show that the concept of joy can be foreboding. As soon as you start to feel good or you start to say, I'm so grateful for something, immediately you're afraid to say that because what if the other shoe drops? I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I have an entire episode on receiving that I'll link in the podcast episode here. It's one of the very first episodes in this podcast. The reason why I'm naming that is I'm pretty sure I tell a story in that podcast, which I'm going to share right now. And it's a story of a conversation I had with my dad. My dad he's one of my mentors, one of my dearest, deepest friends. I love my dad so much. But I was talking to my dad about what's it like when he connects with his family that's back in his country from El Salvador or that's here. And what does he say when people ask him about, how are you doing? How's your family? All those things. Do you talk about like us and how do you talk about us? And he's like, truthfully, I just try to be really quiet and humble. I say everyone's okay and healthy, and that's how I leave it. And I asked him why, and he said, because of mal de ojo. Mal de ojo, I don't know, I guess it maybe translates to stink eye in English. It's this concept that people are going to put this sort of spell on you if you are doing too well. If you are doing too good, too well, be careful because something might happen. And so the concept of not feeling safe when things are going well, not feeling safe receiving, you can see that's multicultural, and that happens for us through generations, and it's something that we've inherited. There's also this concept of scarcity brain wiring. I think this is so fascinating. There's these neuroscientific studies that show that trauma, whether it's personal trauma or collective trauma, it rewires our brain towards a scarcity consciousness or a scarcity mindset, which is this mindset where our amygdala, it's, okay, so let me just pause there. I said scarcity mindset. I'm going to pause for a second because it's not just a thought. Mindset means thoughts or something we're thinking. It's actually rewiring of the actual brain itself. So the amygdala is known as our fear center. We're all born with it. We all have a fear center. It's a tiny little almond-shaped nugget in our brain. So it's called the amygdala. Now, that amygdala, if you are experiencing a lot of stress or chronic stress throughout your life, in your own lived life, it can hypertrophy in size. It gets bigger in size. And if you are in a deeply regulated state and you've trained yourself to meditate or to find inner peace, all those types of things, your amygdala shrinks back down. It's incredible. It won't shrink enough to go away because we all need it. It's part of the reason why we're so resilient, why human beings have survived for so many generations, thousands and thousands of years. It's part of our primitive brain. But what we see in these neuroscientific studies, that if we experience trauma, our brain rewires towards a scarcity consciousness. And the amygdala itself will hypertrophy. It grows bigger in size. And I mentioned that, I think, a little bit earlier. I alluded to that. So the reason why that's also important to know is that when your fear center hypertrophies in size, it decreases your prefrontal cortex, the ability of your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for social judgment, for your regulation, for innovation, for thinking consciously, all those types of things, focus, planning, all of that comes from your prefrontal cortex. But your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala are connected in that when your amygdala is overactive, it decreases the prefrontal cortex activity. And when your prefrontal cortex is hypertrophied in size, when it's bigger, when it's working at its best, it shrinks the amygdala. So just know that the more that we can regulate ourselves, our bodies, the stronger our prefrontal cortex becomes, which means it makes it easier to be focused. to be regulated, to be calm, to be present, to experience joy. It's powerful stuff. So we talked about why it's harder to receive and why it's hard to even accept things when they're good. Like I talked about my dad and Mar de Ojo, abundance that comes with fear. So I want to talk about one other concept that I think is really important when it comes to our fear of receiving, which is overgiving. Because overgiving can be a trauma response. And I name this here because most of the women that I work with in this setting that are just like so loving and giving and so good-hearted, they often want to continue to be in service. But overgiving can also be a trauma response. Sometimes it's framed as being really generous. And so it makes you feel good. Oh, you're just so generous. You're such a giver. That's just who she is. She's such a giver. And there are some people that are born as generous. And there are many cultures where being generous is rewarded. It's beautiful. It's celebrated. But often when we're overgiving without boundaries, when we're overgiving and we're blocking ourselves from receiving, what's actually happening is a trauma response. It's sort of the strategy for belonging to feel safe. Sometimes what that can look like is you are giving so that you can be needed because you don't feel valuable or worthy if you're not needed. You're giving to be valued, to be included, to feel safe in a relationship, or you're giving to avoid conflict or avoid rejection or avoid being seen as selfish or difficult. That's so important. When we are afraid that we are being selfish or that we're being too difficult, that's something we really get to examine because oftentimes that's a conditioned response. Oftentimes we're not selfish. I'll tell you another personal anecdote, personal story here in case it serves anyone. I am a giver, if you can probably tell. I, for a long time, like many women that I serve, had a difficult time setting boundaries. I always wanted to be available. I always wanted to be helpful. And for a long part of my life, I thought that, I know that my mission, my purpose in this life is to be in service to the world and to make this world a better place. I know that. And I've known that for a very long time. I remember when I was a very young kid, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, I had decided that at that age, I decided I was going to be a doctor already because I wanted to help people. I wanted to make the world a better place. I wanted to help people. And as I got older, I knew that I always wanted to be in service. And I actually did not think that I would have time for I didn't value at the time being married or having kids or doing anything like that. I just wanted to be in service to the world. And I thought that the only way to do that was to be a nun. There you go. Being a Latina raised in a very religious house, I thought the only way to do that was to be a nun. Then I learned about what it meant to be a nun, and it was not for me. So I did not do that. But I guess I'm sharing that story with you because even though all of that is true, and even though I have devoted my life to being in service, I was an activist before I was in medicine, and you can just look back at all of the things I've done in my life and you will see how they've always pointed to a life of service. Even though that's all true, I used to think that I was selfish. I remember talking to my sister about this once because I remember being like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to be too selfish. And she was shocked that that word came out of my mouth. She's like, holy smokes. I don't think you have a selfish bone in your body. I can't believe you would think that. So I guess I'm saying that to mean that if we are giving because we're afraid of being named something like selfish or difficult, we really need to examine that because that's probably conditioning coming up for us. Oftentimes we give for all of those reasons because we need to justify. Sometimes we need to justify our existence. We want to make ourselves indispensable or really earn our place. And again, all of this makes sense. And the reason why it's important for all of us to understand how much sense this makes, how this is all really divinely intelligent protective mechanisms, is because we cannot move forward from here if we don't see it with clarity, have awareness over it, and then meet it with so much compassion. Without the compassion, it's going to be hard to move forward. It'll keep us stuck right here. If you were raised in a family or culture where love was conditional, and truthfully, for most of us, love was not unconditional, not because the people that were raising us didn't want to love us without condition. It's because it's really tough. If they were not loved without condition, how do you learn to love without condition if you never experienced it yourself? So typically you were praised for or loved for your good grades or what you did or how helpful you were or how easy it was to take care of you. Oh man, I was really good at being really quiet when I was a kid and I got a lot of accolades for that. Oh, Vanessa's so great. Vanessa's so perfect. Why? Because I didn't make any noise. I was a quiet kid because I was raised in a house that was loud, and I got praised a lot for being quiet. Isn't that fascinating? For being small, for not taking up space. That's what I was praised for as a kid. So your nervous system learns that if I'm quiet, I'll be safe. If I'm useful, I'll belong. If I give enough, people will need me. If I'm needed, then I won't be left out. And the problem with this is I'm going to come back to the concept of receiving again, because there's this paradox that I share a lot when I'm teaching and coaching entrepreneurs, which is you cannot sustainably give more than you can receive. Your capacity to give will be capped at your capacity to receive. Said another way, your ability to give is directly related to your ability to receive. And I want you to imagine this as a sort of like reciprocal circle, giving and receiving in this beautiful reciprocal circle. And the circle can stay sort of small, or it can continue to expand the more you're able to receive. The more you're able to receive, the more this expands. And I don't want you to be afraid that if you receive, it's going to make you lazy. If you receive a compliment, oh, I'm going to become arrogant. No, no, no. Highly unlikely that somebody with such a kind heart is going to become arrogant. Arrogance is a fear response. It's something that shows up when we are insecure. That is not something you need to be afraid of. So you don't need to be afraid of receiving. One of the biggest reasons I've seen people be afraid of receiving is they're afraid they're going to get arrogant if they receive a compliment. It's going to make me arrogant if I say thank you. I'm going to lose my humility. No, humility is part of who you are. Humility, the root word of humility, Humil, it means grounded. It means connected to the earth. Humility just means you're grounded, you're connected to the earth. So whenever somebody gives you something, you receive it with gratitude, with a tremendous amount of gratitude. That is what keeps you humble. That is what keeps this beautiful, right relationship with giving and receiving. It's not going to make you less humble. It's not going to make you arrogant. It's not going to make you lazy. For those of you listening to this podcast, I don't think you have a lazy bone in your body. I don't think you do. And so if you're afraid you're going to be lazy, I don't even think you know how to be lazy. So don't be afraid of that. Just know that if you want to sustainably have a larger impact and you want to give more, you have to be open to receiving. Because when we block ourselves from receiving and then we become exhausted or resentful or burned out, or your business starts to feel really heavy, or your income starts to plateau, now you know why. Because we cannot sustainably give more than we can receive. And one thing that I think is so important to name here is this, that I said you cannot give more than you can receive. But the other thing that's important is that your business cannot outgrow your nervous system's capacity to receive. If you want more clients, more impact, more money, you have to expand your nervous system's capacity to be able to receive that. Because if not, your nervous system will associate all of that, more clients, more impact, more money, with guilt, with pressure, with being a burden. I'm going to fail them, with danger. And you're going to unconsciously block it, not because you're broken, not because something's wrong with you, but because your body is literally trying to keep you safe. If you have not increased your capacity, your nervous system, your brain doesn't think it's safe yet to receive that, because it knows that if I receive that, if I receive all of the stuff that I want, but I have not created systems yet, if I have not, built my capacity to receive support, then when I get all of that kind of stuff, I'm going to feel stressed out and I might burn out. So blocked receiving often shows up like this. It will show up like an income plateau. This is one of the most common things I see. People have been making X number of dollars year after year, and they have a new strategy, a new funnel, a new program they're launching, and they keep meeting the same income plateau over and over again. That's because you have a blockage in your receiving. You have a chronic over delivery. I give. And I don't know why. I'm still not making what I want. I'm still not getting the clients that I want. Same thing. You're working so hard, you're overworking and you burn out. Or you start experiencing resentment towards the work that you're doing, or you're feeling underappreciated and you start complaining about it, or you start saying things like, I'm always giving more than I'm getting, or you start thinking like people are trying to take advantage of you. And it could also show up a little bit more subtly, just like difficulty resting, difficulty asking for a testimonial, If maybe you have a significant other that loves you and wants to support you, and you're like, I'm good. I don't need help. I'm fine. Or you have a VA and it's hard for you to take things off your plate so that they can support you. You have difficulty letting things be easy. That is a big one. If you struggle with letting things be easy, ding, 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 that is a blockage in receiving. Okay. So as we wrap up, I want to offer you a few things to sit with. Number one, I want to remind you that your capacity to give is directly related to your capacity to receive, directly proportional to your capacity to receive. The more you receive, the more you will be able to give. And your capacity to receive will set the ceiling for how much your nervous system allows you to have. If you want to have more, you've got to increase your capacity to receive. And receiving itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not going to make you lazy. It's not going to make you arrogant. None of that is going to happen if you receive. All it's going to allow you to do is have a larger impact in the world. And it's really just a skill we get to build. The more we heal our nervous system, the more we'll open ourselves up to receive. Okay, so this right here is sort of the other side. Episode 1 and episode 2, we talked about our legacy wounding and the relationship between money and power. The other side of that is receiving and becoming a wide open receiver. And this is one of the deepest pillars of the work we do inside of the community that I've created. It's not just learning how to earn, but learning how to be, again, a wide open receiver, to receive without guilt, without collapsing, and without self-betrayal, to receive with a big, wide open heart with so much gratitude. Because we were never meant to be the source of everything. We were meant to be plugged into source, and we're meant to be in a beautiful reciprocal flow with giving and receiving. So I'm going to leave you some questions to think about. Number one, where in your life or in your business are you still more comfortable giving than receiving? And what might change for you if receiving actually felt safe? Okay, sweet friends, we're going to wrap up. And next week is our last week in this 4-part series. And we're going to talk about capacity and what really determines how much success, money, and impact we can hold without burning out or without self-abandoning. All right, sweet friends, I'll see you then. Adios. Hey friends, if this episode resonated, please take a quick second and leave a review, share it with a friend, or post it to your community. It's how we keep helping others who are walking a similar path, and how together we grow the movement of consciousness in business, leadership, and life. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you next week.